Have you ever felt like maintaining friendships has become more of a chore than a joy as you've gotten older? The constant phone calls, the obligatory gatherings, the feeling that you have to keep up appearances even when you don't really want to? Well, here's something that might surprise you. You don't actually need friends after 70, and that's not only okay, it might be exactly what you need to live your most fulfilling years yet. Now, before you think this sounds harsh or lonely, hear me out. This isn't about becoming a hermit or shutting out the world. This is about recognizing that the social pressures and expectations that shaped your earlier years don't have to define your later ones. It's about understanding that sometimes the most liberating thing you can do is give yourself permission to step back from friendships that drain your energy rather than fill your cup. In this video, we're going to explore 6 powerful reasons why friendships aren't as essential in your 70s as they once were, and how embracing this truth can actually lead to greater peace, more personal freedom, and a deeper sense of contentment than you ever imagined possible. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share might completely change how you think about aging, relationships, and what it truly means to live life on your own terms. The first reason you don't need friends after 70 is simple. You finally reach the age where you don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. Think about it. How much of your younger life was spent trying to fit in, impress others, or maintain your place in various social circles? Whether it was keeping up with colleagues, making sure you were invited to the right parties, or constantly worrying about what others thought of you, so much energy went into seeking approval and validation from the people around you. But now you've lived long enough to understand that other people's opinions of you are really none of your business. You've built your life, made your choices, and created your own legacy. The need to constantly prove your worth through friendships has simply evaporated. And what a relief that is. I think about my neighbor Robert, who spent 40 years climbing the corporate ladder, always surrounded by work friends and social acquaintances. When he retired at 72, most of those relationships just faded away naturally. At first, he felt like he should try to maintain them, calling people up, suggesting coffee dates, trying to keep those connections alive. But then something clicked for him. Why was he chasing after relationships that were never really about him as a person, but about his position, his usefulness, his role in their lives? The moment Robert stopped trying to prove he was worth knowing, he discovered something beautiful. He already knew his own worth. He didn't need a committee of friends to validate it. He could simply be himself, enjoy his own interests, and live without the constant background worry of whether people liked him or not. And you know what? He told me it was the most freeing feeling he'd experienced in decades. That's what happens when you let go of the need for social validation. You realize how much mental and emotional energy you were spending on maintaining relationships that were more about appearances than genuine connection. You don't need to prove you're interesting, successful, or likable anymore. You just get to be yourself, and that's enough. The second reason is that peace becomes far more valuable than socializing. In your younger years, a busy social calendar might have felt like proof of a life well lived. The more invitations, the more friends calling, the more places to be. It all seemed to add up to happiness and success. But as you get older, something shifts. You start to crave quiet in a way you never did before. And I'm not talking about the kind of quiet that feels empty or boring. I'm talking about the rich, full quiet that comes when you're completely comfortable with yourself and your own company. The kind of peace that lets you think your own thoughts, follow your own rhythms, and exist without constantly managing other people's needs, expectations, or emotions. Most friendships, even good ones, come with a certain amount of maintenance required. There are phone calls to return, social obligations to fulfill, and unspoken rules about staying in touch. None of this is necessarily bad, but it does require energy and attention. And at this stage of life, you might find that energy is better spent on things that truly nourish your soul rather than on maintaining relationships out of habit or obligation. Take my friend Dorothy, who's 75 now. For years, she had a packed social schedule: bridge club on Tuesdays, book club on Thursdays, lunch with different friends throughout the week. Her calendar was full, and from the outside, it looked like she was living the dream of active aging. But Dorothy told me she started to notice that many of these gatherings felt more draining than energizing. The same conversations on repeat, the subtle competition and gossip, the feeling that she had to be on all the time. One day, she decided to try something different. She started saying no to invitations that didn't genuinely excite her. She let some group memberships lapse. She stopped feeling guilty about spending entire days at home, reading, gardening, or just sitting quietly with her thoughts. And to her amazement, instead of feeling lonely or bored, she felt more alive and content than she had in years. That's the thing about choosing peace over constant socializing. It's not about giving up on life, it's about finally living it on your own terms. When you're not constantly managing relationships and social obligations, you have space to rediscover who you are when nobody else is around. And often that person is pretty wonderful company. If you're finding value in this message, let me know by commenting "peace" below. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss future videos that might change how you think about aging and happiness. The third reason you don't need friends after 70 is that fewer friendships mean fewer disappointments. This might sound cynical, but if you've lived 7 decades, you know it's also realistic. Friendships, no matter how well-intentioned, come with expectations. We expect friends to be there when we need them, to remember important things, to reciprocate our efforts to stay connected. And when those expectations aren't met, it hurts. By the time you reach your 70s, you've probably experienced your share of friendship disappointments. People who promised to stay in touch but didn't. Friends who were there during good times but disappeared during difficult ones. Relationships that you thought were mutual but turned out to be one-sided, with you doing most of the calling, planning, and emotional heavy lifting. Here's what I've learned from people who've embraced this stage of life with grace. They've stopped taking these disappointments personally, and more importantly, they've stopped setting themselves up for them. When you release the expectation that you need a certain number of friends or a certain level of social activity to be happy, you also release the disappointment that comes when people don't meet your expectations. I remember talking to Walter, who's 78, about this very thing. He told me about a friend he'd known for 30 years who gradually became too busy to maintain their friendship. At first, Walter kept trying, calling, suggesting get-togethers, making all the effort, but eventually he realized he was the only one trying, and that hurt. The old Walter would have wondered what he'd done wrong, would have felt rejected, and maybe even angry. But the Walter I know now just shrugged and said, "People change, priorities change, and that's okay. I don't need to chase anyone for friendship." He'd learned that his happiness didn't depend on that person's attention or approval. By letting go of the need to maintain that relationship, he freed himself from the cycle of effort and disappointment that had been draining his energy for months. This doesn't mean becoming cold or uncaring. It means recognizing that true friendship should feel natural and effortless, not like work. When you stop forcing connections that aren't there, you make space for relationships that do flow easily, whether that's with family members, neighbors, or even just a deeper relationship with yourself. The fourth reason your happiness doesn't depend on friends after 70 is that your time becomes incredibly precious, and you finally understand its true value. When you're younger, time can feel endless. There's always next week, next month, next year to maintain friendships, make plans, and invest in relationships. But as you age, you develop a clearer understanding that time is finite, and that realization changes everything about how you want to spend it. Friendships, even enjoyable ones, require time. Time to call, time to visit, time to listen to problems and share in celebrations. And while some of that time is well spent, much of it might not be adding the value to your life that it once did. You start to ask yourself harder questions. Is this how I want to spend my afternoon? Does this conversation energize me or drain me? Am I here because I want to be or because I feel obligated? I think about my Aunt Helen, who just turned 81. She used to pride herself on being the friend who remembered everyone's birthday, who organized the holiday gatherings, who was always available when someone needed to talk. But she told me that somewhere in her late 70s, she realized she was spending more time managing other people's needs than enjoying her own life. So she made a conscious choice to become more selective. She stopped saying yes to every invitation out of politeness. She quit organizing events that felt more like obligations than celebrations. Instead, she started using that time for things that truly brought her joy. Learning to paint, taking long walks, reading books she'd been meaning to get to for years. The beautiful thing Helen discovered was that she didn't miss the social busyness as much as she thought she would. In fact, she felt more fulfilled because she was finally using her time intentionally rather than just filling it with activity. She realized that at this stage of life, quality time with herself was often more valuable than social time that felt forced or routine. That's the gift of understanding time's true value. You get to be choosy about how you spend it. You don't owe your time to anyone just because you always have before. You've earned the right to spend your days exactly as you choose, without guilt or explanation. The fifth reason you don't need friends after 70 is that true companionship comes from within, and by this age, you've finally learned how to be your own best friend. This might be the most important point of all. We spend so much of our lives looking outside ourselves for companionship, entertainment, and validation. But the people who age most gracefully are those who've discovered that the most reliable, understanding, and compatible companion they'll ever have is themselves. When you reach your 70s, you know yourself better than anyone else ever could. You know your quirks, your preferences, your moods, and your needs. You don't have to explain yourself or adjust your personality to fit in with others. You can simply be authentically yourself, and that's incredibly freeing. I met a woman named Grace at the library last year who perfectly embodied this principle. She's 73 and told me she'd spent most of her life thinking she needed to be around people to be happy. She was always planning coffee dates, joining clubs, making sure her social calendar was full. But during the pandemic, when she was forced to spend more time alone, she made an unexpected discovery. She actually enjoyed her own company. Grace started taking herself on dates, to museums, to new restaurants, to concerts. She began having long conversations with herself while gardening, really listening to her own thoughts and feelings in a way she never had when she was constantly surrounded by others. She found that she was funny, interesting, and wise, qualities she'd never fully appreciated because she was too busy trying to be what others needed her to be. Now Grace spends most of her time solo, and she's never been happier. She told me, "I realized I was looking for someone to understand me, to really see me, to appreciate who I am. Turns out that someone was me all along." She still enjoys occasional social interaction, but it comes from a place of choice rather than need. She's complete on her own, and any social connection is just a bonus rather than a necessity. That's what self-companionship looks like. Not loneliness, but wholeness. When you truly enjoy your own company, you stop depending on others to fill your time or validate your worth. You become your own source of entertainment, wisdom, and comfort. And paradoxically, when you're complete on your own, you often attract higher quality relationships because you're connecting from a place of abundance rather than need. If you're still with me and finding these insights helpful, please comment companionship below to let me know you're here. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell for more content about living your best life at every age. The sixth and final reason you don't need friends after 70 is that letting go opens the door to a more fulfilling life than you ever imagined possible. This might seem counterintuitive. How can having fewer people in your life lead to more fulfillment? But here's what happens when you release the pressure to maintain friendships that no longer serve you. You create space for what truly matters. Many people hold on to friendships out of habit, guilt, or the fear of being alone. They continue relationships that feel more like obligations than joys, attend gatherings that drain rather than energize them, and spend time with people they've outgrown simply because they've always done so. But what if you gave yourself permission to let those relationships naturally fade away? I knew a man named Frank who perfectly illustrated this principle. At 76, he was still forcing himself to attend monthly dinners with a group of guys he'd known since college. These weren't bad men, but Frank had evolved over the decades while they seemed stuck in old patterns, complaining about the same things, telling the same stories, bringing a negative energy that Frank no longer wanted in his life. For months, Frank dreaded these dinners, but continued going out of loyalty and habit. Then, one month, he simply didn't show up. And then another month passed and another. Nobody called to check on him, which told him everything he needed to know about the depth of those friendships. Instead of feeling rejected, Frank felt liberated. He used that time to pursue photography, something he'd always been interested in but never had time for. He started taking long drives to capture landscapes, joined an online community of fellow photographers, and even had some of his work displayed in a local coffee shop. Frank told me that letting go of those obligatory friendships opened up space for a passion he never knew could bring him such joy. That's what letting go does. It creates room for growth, discovery, and authentic happiness. When you're not spending energy maintaining relationships that don't truly fulfill you, you have that energy available for pursuits that do. Maybe it's a hobby you've always wanted to try, a skill you've wanted to develop, or simply the luxury of unscheduled time to follow your interests wherever they lead. The beauty of this stage of life is that you finally have permission to be selfish with your time and energy in the best possible way. You can choose what brings you joy without worrying about disappointing others or living up to external expectations. You can wake up each day and ask yourself, what would make me happy today? Instead of, what do I have to do for others today? This doesn't mean becoming a hermit or shutting out all human connection. It means being intentional about the relationships you maintain and honest about which ones truly add value to your life. It means understanding that a small circle of meaningful connections, or even just a deep connection with yourself, can be far more fulfilling than a large network of superficial friendships. As we come to the end of this exploration, I want you to really think about what resonates with you most. Maybe you've already started to feel the freedom that comes with letting go of social obligations that don't serve you. Maybe you've discovered the joy of your own company and realized you're actually pretty good at entertaining yourself. Or maybe this discussion has given you permission to start prioritizing your own happiness over other people's expectations. Whatever sparked something in you today, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Share one insight that stood out to you. Or tell us about a time when you chose your own peace over social pressure. Your experiences and wisdom are valuable, and sharing them helps create a community of people who understand that aging can be about gaining freedom, not losing it. If this video helped shift your perspective on friendship and aging, please give it a like and share it with someone who might benefit from hearing this message. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future videos about living authentically at every stage of life. Remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's wise. At 70 and beyond, you've earned the right to live exactly as you choose, surrounded by only the people and activities that truly bring you joy. That's not just okay, it's beautiful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.